Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sim Kapoor, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Advancement and External Relations at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. We are very pleased to welcome you to our webinar on entrepreneurial thinking for everyone. Before I introduce you to our esteemed guest today, I would like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And without further ado, I would like to now pass on the floor to Sandra Kahali. We have had the pleasure of working with Sandra I don't know, for a number of years now. She is a renowned facilitator, a coach, and a great dear friend of OISE. So thank you, Sandra, for joining us. And thank you to Neil Tinker, who is our IT specialist facilitating this. So thank you, Neil. And over to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Sim, and thank you to everyone who's taking a little time out of their day today to come and talk about this, one of my favorite topics, which is entrepreneurial thinking and how anybody can use it to get what they want out of life. A little bit about me, you may have seen in the bio that was circulated beforehand. I'm an entrepreneur of various guises, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to actually start by backing up a little bit and talking about the first 15 or so years of my career, which were spent as a civil servant. And I worked for federal, national, and provincial governments, which are smaller, like state governments. And I think it would be safe to say that when I began my career, I did not have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. I worked in government, I was very process driven. And then I left government to work in management consulting, public sector management consulting. And that was very interesting to me because a lot of that work had to do with understanding what best practices are and how they could be applied in particular circumstances. About 10 years ago, love took me to a small town in Ontario, which is a very beautiful place where there are no interesting jobs for a woman like me. And that's where I began my entrepreneurial journey. So I started out by opening a consulting firm. And then once I felt like I'd had the hang of that, my partner and I began a scuba diving accessories business. Then I started an events business. Then I took over as chief strategist for my husband's graphic design business. And now I'm working on opening a hotel. And all of these businesses continue on. So these are all going concerns. There's lots of activity around. Sorry, I'm just distracted by the chat, so I'm just going to close that so that I don't see that. And I think it's fair to say that over the course of those years, I was really bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. And as part of my journey, I really set out to understand what it is that successful entrepreneurs do differently. And that really came out of my emphasis on best practices when I'd been in management consulting. And so I kind of approached this like a management consulting role. And what I discovered literally blew my mind, by which I mean it rewired how I think and what I think about and what kinds of actions I take based on what I'm thinking. And that's really what I want to share with you today, is this idea that successful entrepreneurs have something to teach all of us, whether we're business owners or not, about how to take charge and achieve and contribute more in every circumstance and every environment. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I want to start by acknowledging that we're kind of living today in the age of the entrepreneur, right? We're dazzled daily by stories of empires being built and lost and rebuilt, and mergers happening and mergers falling apart. And in a way, we've got all these sort of celebrity entrepreneurs now, and entrepreneurs have become, in a way, modern day heroes. They're held up in the public eye as people who have more, who in some ways are more, are achieving more, are contributing more, in sometimes taking more. And I want to suggest to you that you don't have to be building a business, let alone an empire, to tap into that spirit. Michael Bloomberg has said, and I think this is right spot on, that being an entrepreneur isn't really about starting a business at all. It's a way of looking at the world and seeing opportunity where other people are seeing obstacles, and taking risks when other people are taking refuge. And that's really what kind of distinguishes entrepreneurs from others, is that comfort level with taking risk. And that's something that, in a way, we're all hardwired to do. All of us who are here today on this webinar, all of us who are here today on this planet, got to be here because we're descended from the humans who survived, the early humans who overcame all kinds of obstacles that are in today's world entirely unimaginable. But, from wild animals to environmental extremes, to food shortages, to weather, wars, and more. And they not only survived, they found ways to thrive. And they found ways to thrive because they were resilient, because they were creative, because they were connected with each other. They knew that their survival rested on their ability to be in community. They took risks, they showed initiative, they figured out what they needed, and they found ways to make that happen. And that's exactly what entrepreneurs do today. So we still have that potential within us, and we can use it in lots of ways. So one of the more obvious ways, clearly, is to use it as entrepreneurs, to become people who take on greater than normal risks, often financial, but sometimes others, to organize and operate a business or businesses. We can use that same spirit in the context of intrapreneurship. So when we talk about intrapreneurship, we're talking about intra-corporate entrepreneurship. So people who are inside organizations who are acting entrepreneurially, people who are taking, coming up with new ideas and turning them into new realities. And then we can also take it in kind of all the other facets of life by applying entrepreneurial approaches to getting what you want, including advancing your career or just being happier in general. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So today I'm going to take us through 5 kind of specific, tangible ways that we can approach the world to keep our survival instincts sharp, to stay nimble, and to be successful, whatever may come, just like the humans that we're descended from. In other words, we're really going to look today at 5 things we can be doing to think and act more entrepreneurially in our businesses or in our professions and our lives. And I think that this is an especially relevant and timely conversation to be having right now, when the current global circumstance is really challenging many of us to do things differently, to innovate, and to find new paths forward. So I want to start with the first one, which is really about dreaming. And dreaming gets such a bad rap, right? We so often say dismissively of someone, oh, she's such a dreamer, or he's such a dreamer. And the truth is that you have to dream, that you've got to have lots of dreams. I love the story of Leonardo da Vinci, who, after he died, thousands and thousands of pages of personal journals of his were published. And although he was most famous as an artist, obviously, he actually spent a lot more time working as an inventor in science and technology. And he was one of the most prolific inventors in history. And he dreamed up all kinds of inventions and innovations across a variety of fields. So he worked on weapons of war, he worked on flying machines, he worked on water systems and work tools. And he was never afraid to look beyond what was happening in his current environment or to dream big. Right? And thanks to his daring imagination, we have all kinds of awesome things in the modern world, including ball bearings and parachutes, also machine guns, which are perhaps slightly less awesome, but I'm sure have been useful. And so what Leonardo da Vinci really teaches us is that dreaming shouldn't be something that you avoid or cut short, that actually you want to be creating space to dream. And if you're thinking organizationally, you want to be creating space that's safe for the team to dream in and not feel judged or restricted in any way. And I'd love to see in the chat, if you want to share, do you think of yourself as a dreamer? Are you a dreamer? Are you the kind of person who spends time in the practice of dreaming? And as you do that, I'll share with you that there are so many good reasons to make a practice of dreaming. One of them, of course, is that dreams give us a sense of direction. And there is this idea out there that if you don't know what port you're sailing to, no wind is favorable. If you don't have a vision for where you're trying to go organizationally or personally or professionally, then you can't tell whether something that's pushing you along is an opportunity or an obstacle. So dreams give us direction. They also help us push the boundaries of what's possible, just like Leonardo da Vinci did in his journals, just really thinking outside the box and that's a key aspect of innovation. So dreams give us a place where we can stretch ourselves and think about something bigger than what we're experiencing right now. When we dream in detail, we also give ourselves and our ideas a chance to encounter obstacles before we're actually doing things in the real world. And that helps us not only minimize the risk, but also pursue some of our dreams with greater confidence, right? So sometimes we do dreams as kind of thought experiments, but in other instances, we're kind of thinking through something that we might actually want to begin to take action on, which will be the next thing we talk about. But we want to be, in our dreaming, very open-minded. As Mark Twain tells us, you can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. So the more you think creatively, the more creative you become. And I want to take a minute. I know that I myself was guilty of this for many years. Sometimes we think that because we're not artistic, we're not creative. And those two things are not actually, artists don't own creativity. All of us own creativity. And creativity shows up in our lives in so many different ways, even just in mundane ways. When you open the fridge and figure out something to feed your family based on what you find there, you're being creative. When you find an alternate route to your destination or a cheaper way to do something or a more interesting way to do something, you're being creative. When you pull apart a paper clip and use it to tighten the screw on your eyeglasses, you're being creative, right? So there's lots of examples of opportunities we have just in everyday life to use our imagination. And we really want to be doing that. So I invite you to notice today, this week, when you're using your imagination and when there's an opportunity for you to use your imagination that you could maybe step into. Some questions that will help you spark your creativity, which is really the core of what we're talking about, are things like, what if, right? So if you're thinking organizationally, like, what if we got rid of all of our departments? What if we got rid of the real estate we hold as a university? What would that look like? What if, why not? So why not try this? Why not think about this problem from this different angle? How do we start? How do we start being more innovation friendly? How do we start being more ready to meet customer needs that we're not meeting today? How do we start planning for a retirement where we live in a beach hut, right? How do we start all of these things? So really just opening it up. And part of what this helps us do, right? And we do want to check in, as we sort of go down, who's been down this road before? What is already out there that's worked and what hasn't? So we can start to inform our creativity by flushing out ideas. What lessons have already been learned? And when we do this kind of thinking, when we ask these kinds of questions, one of the things that we're able to do is to overcome one of the most common, I don't want to call it exactly a mistake, but kind of limitations that we tend to put on our creativity, which is that we begin from where we are today and we imagine that change can only be incremental, right? But that's very limiting, needlessly so. And in fact, if you think about it, if 6 months ago I had told you that it would be possible to shut down entire economies, to tell people to stay home and they would do it, to change the way we interact as a society, to find ways to connect and communicate without touching each other or standing too close, or all of the things that many of us have been doing for the past several months, you would have said, that's impossible, that can't be done. But here we are, right? With the right motivations, with the right context, many things are possible. So it's a great idea to be thinking outside the box and to be really encouraging that kind of of creativity in yourself, in your team, in your organization. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it takes to make the space safe to do that. So a dream, of course, is a beautiful thing, but it's not enough just to dream, because a dream without action is basically a wish, right? So when we dream, we want to take our best, most exciting, most motivating dreams and then do them. And if you are familiar with the work of Tony Robbins, you will have heard the phrase, take massive action. And Tony's he's a big guy, and he's got a very powerful kind of a presence. And when he talks about taking massive action, he's talking about taking decisive action toward your dreams. Now, lest you feel that that's a little high pressure, which it can feel in certain contexts, you don't have to take massive action. What if you took imperfect action? What if you took the next best action that you can take? The point is that knowledge by itself, and I'm sensitive to the crowd that I'm speaking to, and the fact that we're inside an educational context here, but I think that we all know that what you know is much less powerful and interesting than what you do with what you know, right? So it's the action we take based on the things that we know that really gets us somewhere. So information and ideas by themselves change very little, but when you implement them, then you start to get somewhere. And one of the things, my father is a chartered accountant. And when I first started my first business about 10 or 12 years ago, I said to him, what have you noticed about all of your most successful clients? And he actually said to me, the most successful business people I know tend to be the ones with the least education. And here's why. They aren't stymied by thinking through things. They don't feel like they have to know everything. They just take action. And then when they get feedback from taking that action, they adjust. So it's interesting to understand that clarity really comes with action, that you can't necessarily think your way out of every problem. Sometimes you have to step into the problem so that you can be in the problem in a different place, and that will move you forward. Action, of course, is what produces results. And results are what we admire about successful entrepreneurs. So we want to be moving towards results. I'd love to hear in the chat whether it's your natural tendency. So we tend to either favor thinking or doing. I myself, I have to tell you, it's my natural inclination is I'm more of a thinker than a doer. But I've really had to challenge myself to not just spend too much time in that dreaming phase, but then to actually take action and see where do these ideas go. So we've talked about dreaming, we've talked about doing. The third thing I want to talk about is connecting, because the truth is that nobody does it alone, most especially the titans of industry and entrepreneurship that we admire. So entrepreneurs, one of the things that, in my early days of sort of understanding what they're doing differently, what they're doing well, entrepreneurs are very good at engaging the energies of everybody around them. So they put time and energy into creating and sustaining networks and relationships. And in most instances, what happens when a business reaches a certain size is that the person who founded that business steps out of practically everything that's operational and spends all of their time feeding their network, cultivating their network, growing their network, because that's where they can add the most value. What a network does when you've got sort of people around you, what that lets you do is to make the most of the intellectual and other resources that other people have, as well as your own. And that's really powerful because it turns the game of achievement away from being a game of resources into being a game of resourcefulness. And resourcefulness, there are many fewer barriers to resourcefulness than there are to resources. So you don't have to have all the money. You don't have to have all the ideas. You don't have to have all of the pieces that it takes to make something happen if you've got a network that you can begin to activate. Many years ago now, maybe 5 or 6, I found myself watching a bizarre reality show called Hillbilly Blood. And it features 2 characters who I think are from the Appalachians. And they have very few resources, these 2. But in one episode in particular, they wanted a chainsaw so that they could more easily process wood that would prepare them for the winter. And so they wanted a chainsaw. They started with nothing. And how did they needed $800 to buy the chainsaw. So how were they going to get from nothing to $800? And this episode was such an exciting and eye-opening insight into the world of entrepreneurship, because although I'm sure these two would not call themselves naturally entrepreneurs, what they did is they began by, they were driving in the neighborhood, and they noticed that one of the neighbors who had a walnut tree, that all the walnuts had fallen off the tree. They were all over the grass. They went and knocked at the door. The woman who owned the house was kind of elderly. She was not going to be collecting those walnuts. And they said, we would like to collect these walnuts. We'll give you, 25% of them, and then we'll just take the rest. No exchange of money, nothing. So they start with a bag of walnuts, and then one thing leads to another. They trade the walnuts for some ginseng. They trade the ginseng for some old knives. They melt down the old knives. They refashion them into these really cool things. They trade those cool things in the end for a motorcycle, and then they take the motorcycle to the shop where they're going to buy the chainsaw, because it turns out that the owner of that shop loves motorcycles, and they manage to organize a trade of the motorcycle for the chainsaw. All of which is to say that connecting is about connecting in community, connecting with people, connecting with networks, but also about connecting the dots, connecting the ideas, seeing a path from here to there, and seeing the relationship between things, the gaps, being in the action and being part of things in a way that allows you to see how the networks are connected. And that's one of the key differences between thinking like an entrepreneur, thinking like an owner, thinking like an architect designer of things, and thinking like an employee, for example. So as the owner, you have to make things happen. You may or may not have the resources to do it. You've got to find a path. So a lot of that has to do with connecting things. The other thing that entrepreneurs know is that when they're connected in community, that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so the entrepreneurs that I'm most interested in, who tend to be the ones who are more mission driven, who are contributing and giving back, those ones know that when you're playing at your highest level, that engages everyone around you in playing at their highest level. And so that's one of the things that I really love about this idea of showing up with all of your excitement and all of your enthusiasm and all of your ideas and all of your openness to taking risks and engaging other people in delivering on a dream that you've got. So we've talked about dreaming, doing, connecting. Let's talk about growth. Growth doesn't have to be about getting bigger. It can be just about evolving and getting deeper into something and building your mastery. So the idea with, in the world of entrepreneurship is that growth really flows from having a dream, taking actions to support that dream, doing that in the context of networks that are going to give you feedback on the action that you're taking, and then being responsive to that feedback. So obviously growth sometimes happens naturally. We learn and grow because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Life is full of opportunities to learn and grow. And it's good to cultivate that flow by, for example, making some time for that in your day, in your calendar, being curious and experimenting, trying new things, whether that's personally or professionally. Keeping good company is huge. One of the things that entrepreneurs love to say is that you are the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So be keeping good company, be spending time with people who know things that you don't know, people that you learn from, and also people that you can teach. And then also taking notes. And what I mean by that is really intentionally reflecting on your experiences, processing the stuff that you're learning, and kind of integrating it into how you're moving forward. But natural learning is not the end, as we know in this environment. Successful entrepreneurs really do take it one step further, and they're purposeful about what they want to learn too. So they leave room for natural learning, but they also have learning plans that are meant to take them into the direction of their dreams. So they pay attention to learning in the ways that work best for them. So it's important to know, some people learn best through listening and discussion. Some people learn best through self-reflection. Some people do well learning in socially interactive kind of peer-to-peer environments. Others might develop insights through touch and physical movement. If you're looking at entrepreneurial thinking at the organizational level, it's important to recognize that you've got all kinds of people in your organization who learn differently, who are inspired differently, and you want to make sure that you're engaging all of those different senses so that people have the opportunity to come to the table and really contribute. We all have very unique abilities, and one of the things that entrepreneurs are particularly good at is honing in on what theirs are and using those to their advantage. A little sidebar that I want to sort of give here is that certainly the successful entrepreneurs that I know spend very little to no time trying to develop the areas that they're not naturally strong in, right? So what they do instead is double down on the areas where they have inherent skills and talents, and really focus on developing mastery in those areas rather than developing proficiency in areas that they're never going to be that good at. They work on developing mastery in the areas where they already have a leg up. And it's very interesting, if you're familiar with the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment, there's some very interesting research that's been done by Gallup that shows that when you work on building the skills that you already have, what you can achieve is insane. So there's one study in particular that I'm thinking of that was looking at the speed of reading, and looking at the difference between people who are slow readers and if they spend time working on that, how much can they speed up their reading, and people who are already fast readers, and if they spend some time working on that, what can they achieve there? And I'm sorry, I don't have the stat in front of me, but it's a crazy stat. Like if you teach speed readers how to read even faster, they end up reading 500% faster than slow readers who have worked on trying to become better readers. So all of which is to say, entrepreneurs don't waste a lot of time trying to get kind of vaguely okay at things that they're not naturally good at. They really focus on the pieces that come naturally to them, where their strengths are, and then they surround themselves with other people because they're connected in networks and in relationship. They surround themselves with other people who can fill in the gaps. So, the challenge is not to be, master of everything, but instead to be master of what you really can master and run with that. From there, so we've talked about dreaming, doing, connecting, growing. Of course, the path of entrepreneurship, it's not all sunshines and unicorns, right? So there's many dark days, and many aspects of running a business are in fact experimental. And so what do you do when things don't go how you would like them to? Okay, so, and I'm seeing some great questions come up in the chat. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave us some time to address some of those, because I love me a question. So thank you. Keep them coming, and I'll leave myself maybe 10 minutes at the end, and I can sort of go through them at that point. So when things are going wrong, the most important thing we can do is persevere. And I love this photo of this little boy. What do I love about this photo? Things have obviously gone a little unexpectedly for him in his experiment. But look at the unbridled joy on his face, the excitement and the enthusiasm that's on his face. And, what entrepreneurs know is that no matter what happens, you have to keep going. And maybe your destination is going to change. Maybe you're not going to end up doing what you thought you were going to be doing. Maybe you had a dream and you had an idea about how you were going to get from here to there, but actually you're going to end up going like this to get there. You've always got to just keep moving. And failure is, of course, an investment in your learning. And you value that and you move on. I can tell you that in the scuba diving accessory business that I started many years ago now, one of the first things we did was spend $10,000 on a website. which at that time was what you spent on websites, because we wanted to have really cool functionality where you could upload your logo to have it printed on our materials. And then we went out and started talking to our potential customers, whereupon we discovered that most of them were not even a little bit tech savvy. They had no interest in loading a file on their own onto the website. In fact, it was way beyond them. And so we ended up scrapping that entire website, which we, after that, referred to as our MBA, because it was a real learning opportunity. And we saw that $10,000 as an investment in that learning. It would have been great to do it for less, but that's okay too. So the entrepreneurs that we think of as being uber successful sometimes have some of the biggest failures. Bill Gates, his first business was something called the Trafodata 8008. And this was a device that could take a look at traffic tapes and process them into useful data. Not so much. So he tried to sell this service to the local county, but he couldn't get the deal. And here's why. The whole thing just didn't work. It just didn't work at all. Like, it didn't do what it was supposed to do. It didn't work. It was a total bust. And that was a pretty big failure at the time. And of course, we know that Bill Gates has gone on and he survived the failure and has had many more since then, but also tremendous successes. Arianna Huffington, the force behind the Huffington Post, her second book was rejected 36 times. Can you imagine having the resilience, the perseverance to hear no 36 times and keep going, right? Her first book was wildly successful. She could not get her second book published. 36 times they said no. Finally, she got it published. In 2003, she's a glutton for punishment, this Arianna Huffington. In 2003, she ran as an independent in the California's state races. And she finished with 0.55% of the vote. She's not worried about it. She's just out there. She's trying things. She's got, she's got dreams. She's out there seeing if she can make them happen. So sometimes we think that failure is the opposite of success. That's not how entrepreneurs see it. Entrepreneurs see failure as a stepping stone to success. It's an essential part of the process. And there is this idea out there that if you are not failing often and spectacularly, you are not trying hard enough. You're not doing anything interesting enough. You're not trying hard enough. Thomas Edison has said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. It's part of the experimental process to fail. If every experiment was successful, it wouldn't really exactly be an experiment, right? The idea of experimentation is that we don't know what's going to happen. And Thomas Edison is another one whose story I just love. He had more than 1,000 patents, the first of which he got when he was 22 years old. And he founded 14 companies, including General Electric. His experiments not only failed spectacularly on many occasions, but one of his early teachers described him as, quote, too stupid to learn anything. Right. But he didn't see that as an obstacle. He took that on as a challenge, and he delighted. He was known to have this little squeal of delight when something would fail, because he found it very exciting to learn from the failure. There's a book that I quite like called Entrepreneuring in Action. So if you're on this webinar today and you are interested in what entrepreneurial thinking can look like inside your organization, that's a good read, Entrepreneuring in Action. And it's by Gifford Pinchot and Ron Pellman. And in that book, they asked successful intrapreneurs what made them different from their peers. And hilariously, over half of them reported some version of, I come to work every day totally willing to be fired. Totally willing to be fired. And what does that mean? So what that means is they've allowed themselves to grow past their fear of authority and past their fear of challenging the status quo, because they know that even if they do get fired, they've got the skills and the creativity and the attitudes that they need to find or create another job. And so that gives them the confidence to show up at work every day with the ability to act as if their employers truly want and value the best of what they have to offer. And that's what they come up with. right? That's what they show up with. So in other words, they don't play it safe. They go all in. And that's certainly something that I think we can all learn from successful entrepreneurs, is that they don't play it safe. By definition, entrepreneurs are not playing it safe. They are taking on more risk. They are stepping up and seeing what happens, rolling the dice and seeing what happens. And they can do that because they have enough confidence in their own ability to problem solve their way out of anything, to find another way, okay, I'm gonna start this business. It's gonna work. It's not gonna work. I can still do something else. I'm gonna propose this idea in the monthly meeting at work, and if they don't like that idea, that's cool. I have other ideas. I'm an idea factory because I spend time dreaming. So to summarize, if you want to activate your inner entrepreneurial spirit, which I truly believe we all have, and in some cases it's just buried a little deeper, or it's just a little more dormant. But what you want to be doing is really these 5 things. So dreaming, you want to dream often, you want to dream big. Doing, you want to take action that actually supports the direction of your dreams. You want to be making things happen. Connecting is about being part of things. It's about being part of communities. It's about being part of networks. So get out there, get connected, connect the dots, connect people, connect dots, connect ideas. And that can be very powerful even just by itself. Grow in the direction of your dreams, process what you learn so you make sure that you're integrating. One of the things, if you're interested in learning, which I have to assume you are because here you are on a webinar, if you're interested in learning, sometimes we can just consume knowledge almost like we're eating a sandwich. We just consume it and then we forget about it. But you really want to be integrating the stuff that you're learning so that you can use it in your life. And then persevere. Keep moving forward from here, wherever here is, right? So always be looking for whatever your next best step is and be taking that step. When you do that, one of the things that you'll find, and this was part of what blew my mind when I first came into entrepreneurship, part of what you'll find is that opportunity is exploding around you all the time. So sometimes we think that entrepreneurs somehow, like, by magic, when they move through the world, opportunities appear all around them. It's not really like that. It's more like, by magic, opportunity is around us all the time. And by putting on the glasses of entrepreneurial thinking, you're able to see it, right? It's kind of like when you put on your night vision glasses and suddenly a whole bunch of things that you couldn't see become visible to you. So opportunity is everywhere. That's always true in every situation, good, bad, or indifferent. And entrepreneurs are simply better at recognizing and pursuing it. And that's something that we can all develop. So while I take a second to look at the chat and see what kinds of good questions have come up, I want to invite you, one of the things that happens so often, we hear some ideas, it's all well and good, and then we just walk away and never do anything with them. So I want to invite you to take a moment to think about, based on what you've heard so far in this conversation, what's a red light for you? So what's something that you're doing that as you're hearing this talk, you're thinking, maybe I should stop doing that. So like, are you, for example, every time you start daydreaming or wandering off with ideas, are you cutting yourself off? Maybe that's something you want to stop doing. Yellow, what do you want to slow down or be careful of or be cautious about? So for example, if you're a leader in an organization, are you creating an environment where the team feels safe, coming up with out-of-the-box ideas, where people can share freely? So are there things you want to be careful about? And then green light, what's something that you could start doing based on what you've heard today that would move you more in this direction of engaging your entrepreneurial spirit so that you can kind of move forward from there? So I'm going to give you a moment to think about that while I just take a quick look. And I think I'm going to stop sharing. I think I'm going to stop sharing so that we can just see our faces here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go. Yeah. So I see that Lydia Okay, so lots of people have been saying, yes, I dream a lot. Is dreaming too much a bad thing? Absolutely not. I dream, but people don't get my dreams. How can I communicate my dreams and get people behind my dreams? And then how can I take my dreams and really move them into action? And one of the things that we didn't talk about today, but that I do often talk about in the context of, entrepreneurial frameworks and what we can do with them, is the idea of dream it, plan it, do it, right? So there is a step in between dreaming and doing, and that's the planning, and that's that systematic and strategic kind of approach to how we're going to get from here to there. I confess, I tend to overemphasize planning. I have two business partners who are the opposite of me, who I'm not going to say they overemphasize taking action, because in a way that's not possible. They're constantly bringing in new data because they're taking action. So that's great. But they don't worry that all the ducks are not lined up. So I think one of the things that I want to encourage you to think about is if we look at dreaming, planning, and doing, you probably already know which of those things you are most naturally inclined to do. And I really want to invite you to think about, how can I balance myself a little bit? So if I'm a thinker and I tend to get kind of caught in the dream phase, how can I challenge myself to move it into planning? If you're a planner, how can you challenge yourself to move into doing? If you're a doer, how can you challenge yourself to just take a minute and think about what you're doing before you do it, just so that you can create that balance? And you don't actually necessarily have to be all the things at once. So sometimes, like in my case with my business partners, what I've done is I'm like, okay, well, I'm a planner. Why don't I get some doers on my team and some dreamers on my team? And then that way we've got all the bases covered, right? So you don't have to be everything, although you can certainly move in that direction. Okay, so yes, okay. Is the idea of dreaming like having a vision for what you want to develop? So a vision is kind of an output of dreaming. So at the beginning, you just want to be really thinking outside the box. So what would it look like if we did this? How could we get this result? How can, you really want to be sort of outside the box, and then you want to use those dreams to arrive at a vision. Can you talk about how to be influential, getting buy-in? In the 4 minutes I have, probably not, but I will say this. There are some ways to get buy-in, but it also has to do with what the culture is. So if the culture is not open, you may be in the wrong place. I don't want to stir the pot or make trouble, but it's possible that if the culture is not open to ideas, maybe it's not the right culture for you if you're a person who's really about bringing your best ideas. Do I think that entrepreneurship and leadership are connected with each other? In their best instances, absolutely yes. But there are aspects of leadership that we don't necessarily find in entrepreneurs who are solopreneurs. So entrepreneurs is a big bucket. Leadership is a big bucket. There are definitely some points of intersection there. So yes, I think they're connected, but they're not the same. Yeah, okay, so some of this has already come up. Yeah, okay, I agree with the notion of honing our innate strengths, but does this not contradict with the idea of stepping out of our comfort zone? No, here's why. Your comfort zone has to do with the psychology of the risk you're willing to take, whereas your kind of zones of genius have to do with what skills you have. So you can have all the skills and still not be able to get the gumption to do something. That's really what stepping out of your comfort zone means. It means doing stuff you're afraid to do. And the stuff that you're afraid to do is not necessarily the stuff that you're bad at. It might be the stuff that you're really good at, right? And that's something that often comes up for people. I see that I only have 2 minutes left, and I think that I need to give the mic back to Sim so that she can say something, wrap up. So I want to leave you with this. If you'd like to talk more about how these kinds of ideas can be implemented inside of organizations or inside your own life, please do reach out to me. You can get me at Sandra at Onward Consulting, ONWORD consulting.com. And I really love this topic, so I'm always delighted to receive emails, for more conversation in this area. thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sandra. That was excellent advice, excellent essentials that I think we all need as education professionals or whatever field and careers we're in. So heartwarming thanks to you and to our audiences. We have about 600 guests who have joined us today. So thank you for your participation. I would like to remind you that we will be following up with the recording of the event to all registrants along with the slides. And as Sandra alluded to, she is available. So you can send the questions to her or at alumni.oise@utoronto.ca. There's some great discussion happening in the chat. So we will ensure to please send us those questions and we will ensure to facilitate those and send them to Sandra. And thank you again, Sandra, and thank you to everyone. And thank you to Neil, who is graciously facilitating this webinar from behind the scenes. Our next webinar is on school reopening checkup on August 6th. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.